Okay, so we're going to get started, and today we're basically going to do our interior day rendering. That's our setup for interior day. I'll walk you through that in just a second, but you also got a handout. I decided to give it to you a day early. I was going to give it to you next week, but I figured I'd give it to you now, about your next assignment. This is the last assignment other than the final that you guys will have in the class. It's assignment 204. You're going to model and render 2 light fixtures. I emphasize 2 so that you remember you need to do 2 light fixtures. Okay? One should be an interior light fixture and one should be an exterior light fixture. We also, of those 2 light fixtures, there should be 2 renderings. So if we do the math, that's 4 total renderings of these light fixtures. Okay? It's basically we want one that is a day rendering of the light fixture and one that is a night rendering of the light fixture. And since there are 2 light fixtures, there's 2 day renderings and 2 night renderings. Okay? All of that is going to be due on the 8th of May, coming right up toward the final. So we have, in this class, we have 4 official weeks left of class, and then we have finals week. So after today. So starting next week. So we don't have too much time left. So that's your assignment 204 to be working on. You are just kind of barely starting to get the skills for it. So it's going to take a little bit. That's why there's time built in for you guys to work on it. If you want to make these fixtures specifically for your retreat, that's probably a good strategy because you're doubling up on your work. And we're going to end up putting light fixtures in the retreat anyway. So that's assignment 204. If you guys have questions, you can ask me about it. In terms of exercise 221, we're going to work on the interior of your building. Some of you are at a place where you're ready to start doing these kinds of renderings. Others of you still need to get caught up and do a little bit more work on your retreat file. That's to be expected. I'm also not expecting that the render that you do today of the interior is going to be the one that you'll turn in for the final. Chances are you'll end up re-rendering it many times between now and then. But it's worth starting to set this stuff up and walking you through it. We also have a limited number of days for me left to talk to you about things, so I kind of have to get through talking to you about a lot of this stuff. But you should be well on your way, and a lot of the models that I'm seeing are well on their way, and I'm excited and I'm happy to start seeing them come together. So I went ahead and I opened up 2 different files for today's purposes. I told you guys that I was going to flip back and forth between the Tahoe site and the coastal site, so you saw some differences. So I'll probably end up doing the night interior rendering on the coastal site. So I'll keep going back and forth. I have the Tahoe site open. This is where we left off last class, where I have my exterior view set up, and I'm ready to start doing the exterior renderings. It's now time to move myself into that interior position, and so I have to think a little bit about my particular, and you know what, for right now I'm going to switch into my ghosted display. So I'm just working on this rather than the full rendered version. I have to think about where on the interior of this is the place that I want to actually do the render. And one thing that you'll notice in the Tahoe site file, sometimes you get these weird clipping planes. They will still render okay, but it has to do with how large the geometry is outside of the file. I'm going to go ahead and hide all of those mountains for right now. And then I'll recenter my view, zoom selected on just my piece here, and hope that that improves it just a little bit as we start to work. Yeah, that improved it. So I turned off the big terrain and started working in close. And so I have to think about where in my building is the right place to take a view. Do I want to be standing on the stairs? Do I want to be in one of these rooms looking through the stairs? Do I want to be down in the lower building? Do I want to flip myself around and see as if I were standing in this room looking back toward the stairs? You have to kind of think about where's the right view. And it takes some time to sort out what is a good interior view. Now, with nothing selected, because we're doing an interior, I might change my lens length from, in this case, I had it at 35 or maybe 28. I might change it down to 18. And that just, it's kind of like when you watch HDTV or something, and they have always the really wide angles when they're shooting the interiors because you can't see that much. And so in this scenario, maybe I'm happy with that view. Maybe I want to flip around and I want to do a rendering that's back over in here. I have to kind of sort out what is that ideal view. The other thing that can be beneficial when we're starting to set up this view is to control the camera with a little more precision. And so with this view showing, I'm going to click on the downward facing arrow here. I'm going to go to Set Camera, and I'm going to choose Show Camera. We did this once before. Remember that nothing changes in this particular view. However, in the other views, we can see that I have a camera with a camera position and a target that I can start to work with. And so in this scenario, it can be really beneficial because I can control where this camera is actually placed. So I could take that, the camera position itself here, and I can move it so that it's way back in this corner of the room. And I can do that by moving the camera position here much easier than I can by zooming in and zooming out on this particular view. Likewise, I can change the target, or I can change what I'm looking at by finding the target in one of these views. Here we go. I think there's my target, and I can move that one, and as I start to move it, you can see that my view changes as I'm moving it. So the point is that I have control over this. Sometimes you want to work with this in another perspective view instead of in the top, the front, and the right side. You can change my view into just the standard perspective view here so that I have two perspective views to work with at the same time. And sometimes that's advantageous because, let me switch this over into shaded mode, because I can start to control it and orbit around so I pick the right points and that sort of thing. So once I have the interior view set the way I want it to, I'm going to click the downward facing arrow here. I'm going to go to Set View, Named Views, and I'm going to make sure that I save this as, I'm going to call it Interior Render 2. Actually, it's Interior Render 1 because it's the first one. There it is. So I can come back to this view later on. And you may find that it's beneficial to give yourself a couple different views initially. So maybe I'll get down into this space here. And once again, the camera is still shown, so I can work through my views here to control what it is. So let's move this so that it's back in the corner. The other thing that you may find is you want to control the height of the camera to be very precise about it. Let me turn on my point here. I'm going to snap to, sorry, you can't control it in its own view. Get down here. I'm going to snap right there, and then I can move that vertically to a specific height. Why is that seaplane off? Move, V for vertical, and I could actually set this camera at a specific height. So I could do, 5'8", for example, and then I know exactly that it's at eye level if I can type, which apparently I can't today. There it is. So I know that that camera is at eye level. I ended up messing up my target quite a bit here. So we need to make some adjustments to that as well. So let's move that back around. Get that pointed inside. Still much too high. Let's move that down. Maybe like that. And so now we're getting back into it. The point here is that I'm controlling the view by using the camera itself rather than relying on just zooming in, zooming out, and adjusting the camera in that capacity. Let me move this a little bit more so that it's tucked inside. It's going to help me get rid of some of the weirdness that might happen. Okay, and so I have this as another view set up. I'll save this view. We go to Set View, Named Views, and we'll call this Interior Render 2, because I'm not sure which one I want to do just yet. So I have my views set up, which is good, but I still need to install lights, because even though this is a daytime render and the sun is outside and I'm going to see the sun outside, typically if we're inside or the room is at all dark, the lights are going to be on anyway. So I need to go ahead and bring in my lights. So let me work in a combination of these views here, and let me actually switch this view into ghosted. And I'm going to bring in some of the lights that I created last class. So I'll go into Edit, Blocks, Insert Block Instance. Now, I have the choice here. It doesn't matter whether I put them in the master site file or whether I put them in as into the base retreat building. I do, however, have to make sure that the V-Ray lights get installed in the master site file. So it's my choice as to where I put them. For cleanliness purposes, I guess I'll put them in the retreat base here, which I already had open. Let me switch this view into my ghosted. I like working in the ghosted at this point because I can zoom in and I can kind of see where certain things are in the view. So, time to put in some can lights in the ceiling here. I'm going to go to Edit, Blocks, Insert Block Instance. I'm going to choose that can light that I had created last class. Sorry, it's in Rhino. And it was the 4-inch can light. That was the one that I built last class. All of the rest of these are fine. I'm going to have it come in here. I would, however, like it to come. Well, it's not going to let me. I'll change it afterward. It's going to be linked as a reference. I'll go ahead and say OK. And I'm going to try to snap it right up there to a known point. Could be in the middle. The point is that by snapping it somewhere, I have a little bit finer control. So let me turn on midpoint. That would let me snap it to the middle. There it is, midpoint. So it's right there on the ceiling. I'm going to jump out of that view, jump down into the top view, and make a few adjustments. So let's move this so that it's off of the wall. Let me turn on ortho here, maybe by 18 inches. There it is. And maybe I want to create several of them along this wall. So let me copy this. And we'll do it at maybe 3 feet. No, let's do it at 4 feet. 4 feet there and 4 feet this way. Sounds pretty good. Let's take these lights here. Let's copy them. And I'm going to type I for in place. And then I'm going to rotate them. Turn on center snap here. From the center right there. So that I have them going in that direction. I ended up with 2 on top of each other, so let me get rid of that one. Like that. So I've just added some lights to the room. Now, maybe or maybe not, this is good placement of the lights. We can adjust and move as necessary. It's bugging me that they're a little bit off, so let me move these over by about 6 inches. And that feels a little bit better. So I've created them. They're in the rendered view now. Or sorry, they're in the perspective view now. That's good. Remember, I can't create the V-Ray lights here because they won't come through in the block. So we'll go ahead and just save this. And then I'll jump over into my master site file. I'll go to Edit, Blocks, Block Manager. And my retreat base linked file is newer. Let's go ahead and update that. Perfect. And so we see the can lights. They've come in now. Now it's time to put the V-Ray lights. Before I do that, I want to control the layers. So let me go ahead and create a master layer here for lighting. And I'm going to do a sublayer for can lights. And I'll make sure that can lights layer is the current layer. Oops. There it is. And now it's time to insert those V-Ray lights. I already have the V-Ray toolbars pulled up because I knew I was going to be using those. I'm going to create a spotlight. And I'm going to use the various views to help me kind of sort this out. Let me turn on my center snap. I'll snap to the center of this first light fixture. My diameter is going to be 2 feet. And my height is going to be 1 foot. And there's my light. Remember that it can't be contained within any object, so we'll make sure that it's lower than my light fixture, something about like that. And then we'll come over to the properties, go into the light, and we have to change our properties. So the units are going to be in watts, and it's going to be maybe a 60 watt. Sorry, I have to move this over. I'm not seeing everything. There it is. Color, 255, 214, and 170. My decay is going to be inverse square. I have numbers here, so it's not a dead bulb, so it should work just fine. I'm going to go ahead and take that light fixture and copy it to my other light fixtures. If it's a dead bulb and you copy the dead bulb, it'll stay dead. So since it's not, I'll go ahead and copy it. I'm going to copy from the center of that light fixture to the center of the rest of these light fixtures. And there it is. So I've installed all of those lights. It's now time to take a look at this Interior 2 render. So let me go to Set View, Interior 2. I'm going to go into my V-Ray options. And right here under the output, I'm going to make sure it's nice and small. So I just want to make sure the lights are working. So I've changed my height to be at 100. And I'll go ahead and do a small test render. And I can tell by the initial rendering that it already looks good. It looks like the lights are installed. I'll let it keep running for a little bit so we can make sure that the arcs did in fact fall on the walls the way that they were supposed to. So even though that's small and blurry, yes, I'm seeing the arcs. OK, I'm reasonably happy. I'm also seeing the sun come into the building there with a little bit of shadow on the wall, so that's pretty good. Now it's time to think about what else could I do to enhance this particular scene. And this is where we may add extra elements like furniture or whatever. And so for this assignment, it's not required that you make all of your own stuff. You're more than welcome to use something from outside. One of the websites that I've found in the past that works really nicely is a website called flyingarchitecture.com. If you go to flyingarchitecture.com, they have a 3D models section that you can look for. Some of their 3D models are pay for 3D models. So here's one. They want to charge €9 to have it. I'm not asking you to buy anything. There are other ones that are available for free. So this one, for example, is available for free. You can just download it. So you can click through and pick one of them. When you download it, oh, I have to sign in. I haven't signed in. When you sign in, you'll be able to download it, etc. And then you'll be able to bring that in as a block reference. Again, I'm going to go back to my original base file right here, and I'm going to bring it into this view. So let's see here. Make sure I'm in the bottom. There we go. I want to put it right here in this corner. It's always a good idea, though, when you download something from the internet to open it first and see what it looks like. So the one that I'm going to use, obviously I've already downloaded from the internet, but I'm going to go through the same process. So let me go ahead and pick this one here. And we'll open it up. OK, so this is not something that I made. It's something that somebody else made. But I'm going to confirm a couple things. One, that the materials are applied to it correctly. And two, that the layer structure is reasonably organized. So in this case, the layer structure is reasonably organized. If I go into my V-Ray material editor, I can see that there's chrome in here, there's a leather, and there's a steel matte. I'm going to preview each one to make sure that I'm not missing something. Yep, the layer's OK, and the chrome, all of those preview fine. So that's good. At this point, I can go ahead and save it. So I'll go to File and then Save. Now it's ready to bring in as a block. You can't trust somebody else's model, so it's always worth going in and making sure everything's applied correctly so that we don't have problems later on. Likewise, it's also good to make sure that it's near 0.00, which makes inserting it a little bit easier later on. So let me go ahead and flip back to my retreat base. There it is. I'll go to File, or excuse me, Edit, Blocks, Insert Block Instance. And we will go find the chair. I'll say OK. It's going to be linked as a reference. I'll say OK, and we'll drop it in right there. It's not quite in its correct position, so I'll do, again, I'm working in the top view here. I will move. I will move again, and then I probably need to rotate it. And I'm going to turn off ortho here for a second so I have a little bit more control on it. Do it about like that. Let me move it over. Maybe about like that, and now I have that chair. If I want a second chair, I can copy it, rotate it again, etc. So you can start adding in these elements. I'll go ahead and go to File and then Save. I'll jump back to the master site file. You see how all these relate to one another now. I'll go to Edit, Blocks, Block Manager. The retreat base, I'm going to go ahead and update it. And it usually takes a little bit of time because this block is a very large block. Perfect. It's successfully updated. Yep, there's the chair. So now once again I have the render and it's nice and small. We'll go ahead and do another test render and make sure this looks the way that I kind of want it to look. I can zoom out just a little bit there. And this one should have the addition of that chair. So I've put the lights in. I probably need lights elsewhere in my model, so it would help if I went ahead and put the lights in. The advantage here is if you put the lights in now, you're basically good to go going forward into the night scene. You've already put the lights in. So the more effort you put in now, the easier it's going to be. We're going to keep working with the same file. Yep, there's my little chair. That showed up. Even though the quality is not that high yet, it's OK. We can see that the chair is there. So this one is currently set up as the daytime render. The render is turning out the way I want it to. For backup purposes, I'm going to go into my V-Ray options here, and I'm going to click the little disk, and I'm going to save a visopt, which is the V-Ray settings file, as a backup. So I'm going to go into my flash drive onto today's folder here. And there it is. And I'm going to say that this is the Tahoe day visopt as a backup. Okay, and I can even add backup to it. And I'll click Save. That means if something goes wrong or one of the settings changes, I can always come back and reload this exact scene. Furthermore, when we get to the night scene, I'm going to save the night scene and the day scene, and we'll be able to flip between night and day depending on which set of settings we load. So I'm feeling pretty good about it. Now it's time to think about increasing the quality of the rendering and or making it a little bit larger. So a couple things that I want to do. First off here, I've already done my test render. It's turned out nice. I'm happy with the light settings. OK, all that's good before I bump up the size. I'm going to unlock the image aspect ratio, get the view aspect one more time, and then lock it. So exactly what I'm seeing is what I'm going to end up getting in my particular scene. Then I will increase the width or the height. Now, this dimension is typically, you would calculate it out based on the final size of the rendering that you wanted to create. So if you were printing it on an 11 by 17 sheet, for example, you would want either the 11 or the 17. I don't know that my aspect ratio exactly matches. And for every inch that you're going to print, you'd want 300 dpi. So if you eventually wanted, say, a 10-inch piece, it would be 3,000 dpi in our resolution. So one of these would be 3,000, for example. And there it is. If I wanted it to be larger, I could do whatever 17 times, can't do it that in my head, 17. That would be 5,100 would be my width. We can do a nice round number. Let's do it at 5,000, for example. And that would give me the correct resolution for printing at this size. Not all of you will have time or be able to do the highest quality rendering for all of your renderings. This is the ideal setting. Sometimes you can get away with less. It's just a little bit more blurry looking. I will pull out the sample files that I have from previous classes, and you'll be able to take a look, and you can quickly see, oh, that one's in high resolution. Oh, that one's not so high. And so it does make a difference. When we start getting into these higher resolution outputs, and I'm not going to go a full 5000 right now. I'm going to drop this back down. I'm going to do my height at 1080. I think. Yeah, there we go. And so when I drop this back down a little bit, the other thing that becomes advantageous is we want to come up into our system and we want to turn on the distributed rendering. The distributed rendering works really nicely when you have a very large render file happening. So if you think your render is going to take more than, say, 10 minutes, that's when you want distributed rendering turned on. If it's going to take less than that, distributed rendering can actually end up being slower. So if you have a render that's only going to take a minute, it's actually slower to turn on distributed rendering because we have to wait for the computer to talk to the other computers and for those to come back and talk to you again. And so that can actually delay the render and make it take a little bit longer. So you guys are all aware by now that when you first start up your computer, this little XML-DR spawner pops up. You should make sure that you leave that open and tell your friends to leave it open, especially if they're working on their history paper or something, because they don't need all the computer horsepower. And so we need that to be open, which it currently is. That's good. And then I need to go ahead and turn on the distributed rendering. So it's available under System. Distributed rendering, we're going to turn this on. So I put the little check mark here. And then under Hosts, I need to start specifying hosts. Now in the old days, we used to just be able to click on the Find Servers button, and it would just go and find all the available servers for us, which was great. For our purposes now, when you click on Find Servers, it's only going to find your own computer. And that's because they increase the network security for us. So we need some specific IP addresses for these computers. And unfortunately, this adds a layer of complexity that I wish we didn't have. If you get a little bit lost, all of this is written up in the tutorials, V-Ray, and it should be called distributed rendering. Network rendering, there we go. And so if you get a little bit lost, all of this is written up what I'm going through right now. So I need to find out what the lab's IP address range is. So I'm going to go into I'm going to start with the little search icon here, and I'm going to type in CMD for the command prompt in Windows. And once the command prompt is up, I'm going to type in ipconfig. And that's going to give me information about the computer's Ethernet ports. And so the value that I'm looking for here is under the IPv4 address. It's 10.24.199.3. That is this specific computer. But 10.24.199.1 through 33 are all the computers in this lab. The other thing I should point out is that we unfortunately don't have access to the other labs because of the way they partitioned up the firewalls. So we used to have 90 computers. Now we get stuck with just what's in the lab. But you could do this in the other lab where less people are doing rendering. So I'm going to make a note of this 10.24.199.3. And I actually physically am making this note right now. And then I'm going to go in right here, and in my distributed rendering settings, I'm going to click on this Add Server button. And I'm going to go ahead and type in 10.24.199.1. And I'll say OK. Then I'll go back and add server, and I'll do 10.24.199.5. And click OK. I'll click on Add Server, 10.24.199.6. Add server, 10.24.199. Let's do 13. And I'll do one more, 10.24.199.31, for example. I want to do about 5. That's a pretty good number. You could do up to 10. If you do the whole lab, there's going to be some lags, and you're not going to get that much efficiency. So I think you're better off in the 5 to 10 of these. Insert them about 5 at a time. Obviously, don't put your own IP address in there because that doesn't help you. You're already rendering on your computer. So I have all of those put in. I'm going to check the boxes next to them to enable them. Like that. So they're all checked. And then I'll click on this last button that's called Resolve Servers. Nothing much happens when I do that other than it puts in an actual IP address here. And I can go ahead and say OK. If you put more than about 5 in at a time, it runs the risk that V-Ray crashes. And we'll hope that V-Ray didn't crash on me. While that's coming back, I'm going to go ahead and save my file here. See, it goes to show you that it happens to me. So in that scenario, I'm going to have to go back and re-put those in. So I'm going to go ahead and close that version of Rhino. I'll open Rhino again. And there's my master site file. We'll open that one back up. All right, there it is. Back into my V-Ray options. Back into the system, distributed rendering on, click on hosts. Yep, I lost it, so we have to go back through. I can add myself first. There we go. There I am, and then I'll add a few more. 10.24.199.1. 10.24.199.3. No, that's me. 10. 10.24.199. I don't know, 16. Resolve those servers. I'm going to say OK. I added a small group. Then I'll come back and add a few more. Add server 10.24.199.23. 10.20. OK. So I added a few more. We'll resolve those servers again. We'll say OK. And that time V-Ray didn't crash. That's good. So distributed rendering is on. That will speed up my render times. The rest of my settings are all good. Under output, I have my changed resolution. That's good. It's not the full resolution that I might do eventually. The one other thing that I'm going to point out right now is something called a Vfb channel. And in the Vfb channels, and I start to make notes, it's actually noted under part 3 today for you guys. When V-Ray performs renderings, it renders more than just the final image. It renders other things that are helpful in the long run. And so I have a selection of things that I think are useful, and you just want to make sure that they're highlighted in blue. So Rgb Color is the image itself. Alpha is what is kind of transparent. It's like what is the sky. It's the transparency value. Reflection are the reflections only. Shadows are the shadows only. Lighting is only the light that's cast. Render ID and material ID are kind of the same thing. Every object gets a unique color. If you've worked in Photoshop, you can select by color. So having this at your disposal is very useful when you're doing masking in Photoshop. And Z-depth has to do with blurring the background of your image after the fact. All of these are things that can help you a lot in Photoshop. Background is the rendering of just the background. So if you turn those on, it won't slow down your rendering at all. It's just saving stuff that V-Ray does anyway. So we'll go ahead and leave those guys on. I'll show you those after the rendering's finished so you can see what they actually are and what they look like. So now that I have all of my settings correct, it's time to go ahead and perform the final rendering. I'll go ahead and click on the Render button, and that will open up the V-Ray rendering. And you'll see here that things are a little bit different when I'm doing the distributed rendering. One, the number of the computer that's doing the rendering is showing up in the little boxes, which is a little bit different. And two, if we look at this text, you can see here I are. It's starting the render farm. It's looking and it's connecting to all of these different computers. That's good. Using 7 hosts for distributed rendering. Then down here, it's sending out all of these files to those computers. So it has to send out these referenced images. This is why it takes a while. Notice that my computer's already started on the rendering. So about a minute into this, suddenly my screen will populate with a bunch of little squares, and all of those computers will start giving me input, and it'll speed up the rendering time. So you can dramatically speed up your rendering with the use of this render farm. You just have to be a little bit patient while it gets started. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that one to keep rendering. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to show you guys today. I don't think so. With your time today, make sure you're still working on your project. The further along you get, the better you're going to be long term. We obviously are moving in the direction of the 2 night renderings. So next week we'll do the interior night rendering first on Monday, and then we'll do the exterior night rendering on Wednesday. And then that leaves us with 3 weeks to finish out the remaining things that I want to teach you in the semester. Okay? So I'm going to let you guys go, but I will let this finish rendering so you can see the final version. And then I'll call you back in a little bit so that you can see the channels that were rendered with it, so you have an idea of what those channels are. Okay? Okay, so it finished its rendering, but I wanted to show you really quickly the different channels, and so I needed to let it finish its rendering so that we could do that. In our V-Ray frame buffer window here, the channels that I selected are all available to you in this drop-down. So the Rgb color is the normal render that you're seeing. The alpha is the transparency. So you see I get a mask of just what is clear, what is going through the windows, and what is solid. If you're familiar with Photoshop, this is a great way of masking. So I can use this as a mask to create the mask that I need so that I can control what's being seen outside of a window. Z-depth, nothing showing here. I'll do a tutorial on Z-depth later on in the semester, but you might as well turn it on anyway. Background, in my case, everything's inside. If I had the exterior render, I'd see just the background here. Lighting is giving me where just the lighting is, which can be useful to enhance it in Photoshop afterward if we wanted to. Material ID didn't give me anything. Let's try reflection. There we go. These are reflections, just seeing the parts that are reflected. Render ID, there we go. Render ID gives me colors for every object that's in there. The advantage here is if I wanted to make something specific on a wall, I could select that wall in Photoshop, use that as a mask really easily by color. And then shadow, this is giving me just the shadows in the scene. And so all of those are available to me, and it didn't take any extra work on V-Ray's part to create them. So previously, we've always been clicking on the regular save button here. Right next to it is a series of disks all together. This will save all of the channels plus your color version for you. So you don't, it's just one click, you save everything. So start getting in the habit of turning those on and then going ahead and saving all the image channels at once. You may not use them, but if you go back and want to do some post-processing in Photoshop and you have them, it's all the better. So worst case is you throw them out and you don't use them later on, or they just sit in a folder. Best case is you end up needing them in Photoshop and you say, oh, I'm glad I ended up rendering that alpha because now I can use it as a mask or whatever. So if you get yourself in the habit of doing it, it's a good idea. So just make sure you start clicking that save with all the disks when you go to save your image rather than just the single image. Okay, so I promised I'll be quiet from now on. I just wanted to get you the rest of the way there. And so that's it.